Energy is a vital input to the socio-economic development of any country. And Sri Lankan government established the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority in the year 2007. The key objects of the Sustainable Energy Authority include renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy policy recommendations. Today, all the countries are thinking about energy transformation for a better future, building back better, and also sustainable development. In this endeavor, Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority plays a key role. And technologies and knowledge also play a key role in the development endeavors. When we talk about the knowledge, the tacit knowledge, the hidden knowledge of a person encapsulated with long years of experience is vital, and those who have championed in some degree in the achievements of Sri Lanka's energy sector are to be captured in order for us to disseminate that knowledge among the future generation. Therefore, Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority commenced a new program to capture the tacit knowledge of the energy champions, and then this is the first in that series of the tacit knowledge dissemination. Today, with me is engineer Shavindranath Fernando, who had been a pioneer in the energy sector, whose knowledge in turning the challenges into a championship had not been recorded or documented anywhere. And through discussion, we believe that the secrets behind his success will be revealed and would be available to the future generations of Sri Lanka in achieving the energy-related goals and objectives. You are most welcome to this discussion, Shavi.
Thank you very much, Namis.
Shavi, as a young engineer, did you ever dream of or planning to take a leading role in the energy sector in Sri Lanka?
I don't think so. In fact, I only want to become an engineer, just an engineer. But I think, after graduation, I worked for 2 years in the electricity board, and I just applied for a master's at Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, one of the prestigious regional institutions. And there I was exposed to the field of renewable energy, which I got fascinated and I got attracted.
Yes, possibly you may have played a vital role in the Pattyapola Rural Energy Center. It was way back in the 1980s, and this center had a solar, wind, biomass and biogas hybrid. And this was way before the renewable energy technologies were proven in the world. Now, after that, I think you were also involved in the introduction of the 3 megawatt wind plant in Hambantota. How confident were you in these endeavors?
I should say I was very confident because I was fresh from the AIT, bubbling with knowledge, new acquired knowledge on renewables. So I want to do something. And it came as a surprise to me when I was posted to the energy unit at that time, which also managed this very famous Pattyapola project. Incidentally, the Pattyapola project is one of the first of its kind in the whole world. People may not know that. It was inaugurated in 1977, October, I think. I still have the pictures of the, I wasn't there, but I have taken the picture of the cornerstone that was laid on the 11th of October 1977, if I believe. And then I was put in charge of this project, where we had 4 1.5 kilowatt 3-bladed wind generators, a 2 kilowatt, just a mere 2 kilowatt solar array, 3000 cubic feet Indian type biogas digester, which produced biogas to run a generator, and a few more things. And I just imagine when the whole country was in darkness at the time in those hinterlands, in a small village in Pattyapola closer to Tangol, we lit up 80 houses, rural houses, in those times, and it was a kind of a magic for many people. People came in thousands to see this project. It was one of the first in the whole world. Why do I say that? Because these 3 projects were initiated by the United Nations Environmental Program, and one was to be in Asia, the second one was to be in Latin America, and third one was to be in Africa. I have never heard about the other two projects, what happened to them, but the Pattiable project was survived for 2 decades, giving electricity to these 80 houses throughout, and of course only for 3 hours in the night.
Of course, today we witness the 103.5 megawatt
Oh, yeah.
Kamba Pavani wind farm in Mannar.
Yes, that
So
gave
this
me
was
another
the start.
Yes,
isn't
that
it?
gave me another cue to the first question that you asked me about the 3 megawatt wind power pilot wind power plant. In fact, somewhere in latter part of the 80s, there was an initiative from the World Bank expressing their willingness to give us some money for the development of the renewable energy sector. So I was quick to grab this opportunity, and I designed and put a board paper and got the approval from the board to put up a 3 megawatt pilot wind power project. And by the time we had done already some wind and solar resource assessment, especially in the southeastern quarter of the country with Dutch assistance. So we are very confident that we can put up a small pilot wind power plant just to prove the concept. But wind, in fact, is my pet subject because I had my master's thesis was on wind hydro integration. So I was very keen to put this project through. Then along with this project, through the Energy Services Delivery Project 1, we also put up 100,000 solar home systems. I should say that was the commencement of all the renewable energy initiatives in this whole country.
Coming from Pattipola Rural Energy Center, what had been your role in the off-grid electrification in Sri Lanka, in particular off-grid micro-hydro village electrification schemes and solar home systems?
I think I brought the very solar panel from the very first batch of solar panel that we input to this country. I mean, look at this, just 8.5 watts. Today we are talking of, today we are talking of 500 watt panels. So this is the first, from the first batch of solar panels that we ever brought to this country to be sold for rural household lighting. So this, I would say, once again, a big initiative from the CEB to introduce solar photovoltaics for rural household lighting. And we had a large number of these units being sold. Just at that time, it was just 10,000. So we sold the entire package, Even you can still see the stand, Even the stand was given by us. And they only had to go and fix it. And we gave them a battery and 3 8-watt lamps. And that was sufficient for a very small household. So we had 2 other bigger panels, like 32 watts and 44 watts. With that, we told them if they want to, they could also have a black and white 12-inch TV for the night. So all that was provided, and that was one of those initiatives we introduced for rural household lighting. That was, I think, was the birth for the solar home systems project of the World Bank as well. Then you asked me about the micro hydro initiative. Yes, I had a passion for hydro right throughout my life, and we knew by that time ITDG was very active in sort of reviving this about 400 micro hydro plants we had in the plantation sector, in the tea industries. So I got involved with them, and what we thought was we must train engineers in the designing and implementation of small hydro plants. So we trained, I think, within the latter part of 80s, like 88, 89, and 90, somewhere thereabouts. We had 3 training programs assisted by the ITDG, and the CEB did joint training. And we trained more than 90 engineers. I'm so happy to see. Some of the people whom we trained are still stalwarts in hydro initiative in this country, and they have also gone places. Some of them are working in East Africa, you name it. I mean, these are all because of our efforts to promote the resurgence of small hydro. I must also tell you a small thing. We knew that there were small villages, small hamlets, where they just wanted a kilowatt, kilo and a half. And there we introduced just the normal induction motor converted to a generator. And that was also done by RTDG with us. And the word pico hydro was coined, I'm sure, from our initiatives.
Off-grid is good, but at the same time, off-grids have certain limitations. Now, do you think evolvement or the development of the off-grid sector paved the way for the grid-connected, non-conventional renewable energy? And at the same time, standardized power purchasing agreements in Sri Lanka?
Most certainly, yes. I always had this problem. When we introduced these solar home systems, they're one of the biggest problems that I ever had. This village, they'll have solar home systems of which you can only get power for the 3 hours of the day in the evening. And just your neighboring village will have grid electricity. So I always knew this is not going to be sustainable because people will be always comparing grid is always better than what I'm having here. So this actually led us to allow these grid connected solar projects as well as even grid connected small hydro projects. So then we had to have a mechanism. How do we compensate those who produce during daytime and consume during night time? So we had to come out with what you call a standardized power purchase agreement. But that's not exactly the solar home system, rooftop system. That's a different matter. So solar rooftop system became led the way to what you call the feed-in tariff. So that if you have a solar rooftop, then you feed into the grid and you get paid for that. Then the small power purchase agreement, that was a unique development where we couldn't, possibly go for tendering, small power plants. That's why we confined to 10 megawatts. And that was once again with the assistance of the World Bank. We developed a tariff that was at that time called the avoided cost of generation, which I don't know is the correct thing to do all the time. But that led the way to a tremendous growth, especially in the small hydro sector. A lot of megawatt scale hydropower plants came up with this small power purchase agreement, and also a few biomass projects, and of course quite a few wind projects as well. That was all through the small power purchase agreement initiative that we introduced.
The SPPAs are particularly for the projects of less than 10 megawatts. But at the same time, these days the rooftop solar home systems or rooftop solar systems are quite famous. And we have net accounting, net metering, net plus, different schemes. And at the same time, the Suryabala Sangramaya program really promotes rooftop solar in a big way. And how do you see this type of small scale power generation integrated into the grid?
Well, there are benefits and of course, obviously challenges. If I may speak about the benefits, in fact, say if you take solar, right, the best would be to distribute the generation as much as possible. Because solar, the source itself is distributed. So why concentrate in one place and generate? So it doesn't make sense. So it's better that we distribute the generation also as much as possible. But it has its own challenges then. One of the problems that we are having with solar rooftops is there can be kind of voltage violations. It's very difficult for people to understand what I am saying, because during the daytime, the load is hardly anything in certain feeders. And we are giving maximum generation from solar from on this side. So there's a tendency for the voltage to go up. That's a challenge. On the other hand, if you take the solar concentrated power plants, like the 10 megawatts in one place or 1 megawatt, in fact for that matter 1 megawatt in one place, just imagine when there's a cloud cover for a few minutes, the entire 1 megawatt, entire 10 megawatts come to zero. So this has always been a problem for the grid to manage, this fluctuating renewables. So of course, if the grid is very strong and if the grid has enough storage, when I say storage, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking of battery storage. The storage, there's a way that the electrical engineers define what you mean by storage, kind of storage. Inertia, we call it inertia. There are technical words, I don't want to get into technicalities. So there are pluses and minuses. And you asked me the question why solar rooftop is getting popularity vis-a-vis the solar projects. There's obvious reason, it's the price. The price is so good to attract any person to have a solar rooftop on their roofs. What had happened is the solar power plant cost has come down so much, and we still keep the feed-in tariff quite good. So these are one of the reasons why a lot of people are now getting attracted to solar. Of course, there was a reason, the Suryabala Sangramaya, to create an awareness, to create the hype in the introduction of solar photovoltaics. That is the reason.
Of course, now we have been talking about power generation, but Sustainable Energy Authority is also responsible for energy efficiency aspects, where the demand side management comes in. And you have been responsible for both power generation and demand side management. How do you see the link between these two?
For just a man on the street, it may look nonsense. Here we are generating electricity and we are telling the consumers don't consume electricity. I mean, it looks a little funny, but not at all funny. Because we have to understand from the point of generation up to the user, we have wires. So all these wires are resistors. So that's kind of power loss, even down the way, up to about 10-15%. His energy is lost on the way from the generator to the user. So when you have demand side management, you are cutting down on the generation here. You are cutting down the consumption here. So as much as you cut down the consumption here, the amount of energy that you have to supply to that particular person gets reduced. That's one reason. Second reason, which is more tangible, is the entire country is going to benefit. I mean, I will be very bad in what I am going to say. It's better to allow someone to steal than to waste, if you get it correctly. I mean, stealing is ethically bad. I would say wasting is even bad, worse. Because if you steal, somebody is going to consume. So just like that, in energy, if you do demand side management, I think everybody is going to benefit. This is what I call a win-win situation. And here again, I had a little bit of activities in conservation and energy management, I would like to call it. And way back from 1983, so you were, in fact, that is, you were talking about the Sri Lanka Energy Managers Association. There we really promoted energy conservation. And thereafter, there was a special division in the Ceylon Electricity Board itself called Demand Side Management Unit. And that was responsible for all the efforts that the SLSC is doing now on building energy, having building energy codes, then standardizing some of those, even the, I would say the energy efficiency building equipment, energy consuming equipment. The initial steps were laid by the demand side management unit of the CEB. And that should definitely get integrated. And then we cater to the demand, having taken into account the demand side management initiatives. So what's wrong with that? The country is going, if the country is going to benefit, I don't think CEB is going to grumble about it by losing a few kilowatt hours here and there. They'll be very happy to contribute to this national endeavor.
Well, going a little further, you have shouldered responsibilities in power generation, whether it is renewable or non-renewable, and also demand side management. You were also responsible for the long-term generation expansion plan. Now, how do you think that they should strike a balance among them?
I think I just mentioned about this DSM before. And also, I mean, as I said before, the long-term generation expansion plan is something that, people cannot quite understand. Because the very fact that when you do long-term generation expansion plan, I'll just take a very small analogy. It's like planning your transport system. So in the morning, you want all the modes of transport, let's say, be it trains, buses, trishaws, private cars, taxis, school vans, everything to work. But then when the demand is low for the transport, you don't want most of those things. They lie idle. So the power sector is also the same. When the maximum demand is there, we have to operate all the coal power plants, all the diesel plants, all the hydro plants, you name it, you have it. And of course, we have a bit of problem with when you have renewables, because in our case, the demand occurs in the night where you don't have solar. So this is a very tough balancing act that we have to manage. And when you do the long-term planning, we take the data for about 40 years in case of renewables. Then we have to make a forecast for about 10, 20 years, the demand. Because once you buy a power plant at tremendous cost, that has to be there for the next 30, 40 years. So we need to plan for 30, 40 years ahead actually. So but when we publish a plan for about 20 years. But just imagine, the Laksapana power plant was commissioned in 1950. Now 70 years hence, still that is giving us energy. So that is what people don't realize. When you take a decision to put a power plant, that goes a long way. So the money that you commit, the cost that you incurred down the line, it's also to be taken into account when you develop the long-term plan. So it's not easy. People can say, I mean, what is that long-term plan? would just replace this 100 megawatts of this or the other with something else. Because the characteristics of that particular power plant is completely different. Now take for instance, solar is different to wind, is different to small hydro, is different to coal, it's different to the diesels. So how can you can juggle with these different characteristics of power plants and what their costs are, and we try to always endeavor according to the act to give the least cost plan to the country, because they have no choice. The consumer have no choice what kind of energy we should have. So it's a combination. So we have to, it's a responsibility of the CEB to make a plan that is cost effective and viable.
Well, now let's try to get a little bit about you yourself. Now, as a successful energy professional, what do you think your traits had been, particularly in maintaining stamina, perseverance, motivation, that type of things, your personal characteristics?
I'm glad that you asked me this question. I had two things in my mind, always. I stood for that. Two quotations from the Bible, in fact. Do unto others what you like others to do unto you. Point number one. Point number two. If you know what is right to do and not doing, is a sin. And I never want to be a sinner. So these two things kept me going. I never ruffled, then I stayed focused on my job. And so many responsibilities I shouldered, I was never awed. I was never afraid, and I never took it as a burden on me. I took it, its own stride. I tried to do my best. I may have had my own failures, but more often than that, I stayed focused. I told even my subordinates, my staff, always, don't get swayed by what is happening around the world. Stay focused. Stay focused on your final goal. That is where you need to go. If you start swaying this way, that way, and listen to the noise, that is where you go wrong. So I never did that. I never allowed my staff to do that. So when we took a job, we looked at the job, we stayed focused. Our main intention was to somehow achieve that. That was our, if you like to call it, success.
Now, in your journey in the energy sector, you may have encountered and faced a lot of challenges, haven't you? So, how did you overcome them? Particularly, we know about your role in championing the Upper Kothmale project, and we would really like you to reflect some of your challenges you encountered and how you overcame. Particularly, there had been a couple of critical instances as well.
I'm glad that you also asked that question, because if a lot of people say that Upper Kothmale was my life, because I was involved with the Upper Kothmale hydropower project from its inception in 1992. And then we did the initial studies, we did all the environmental impact assessment studies, we in fact got the approval. Then hell broke loose, most of you know that. And there are a lot of challenges, yes, we had more challenges than anything else. And there were in fact attempts on my life. The house that I used to go and stay at Talawakale was set on fire. I mean, thank God, nothing happened. The fire just doused itself. Right, I wasn't there in the house, fortunately. It doused itself, nothing happened. Right, the entire house had a wooden roof, nothing happened. Only the polish of the wooden furniture were burnt. Then the second instance came when only my driver was a witness. About a mob surrounded me, and somebody came with an iron bar, almost trying to hit me. I looked straight in his eyes. I said, "Palitha, මොකද්ද ප්‍රශ්නේ වාට?" I mean, he was shocked. He slowly put his rod down. I had faith that, if I'm not doing anything wrong, nothing can befall on me. So that is one of the things that I had faith in. I had faith in the people. You see, I always wanted to do something people-oriented for the people, no matter what I wanted to do. So that, I think, was the successes of Upper Kothmale. And my great passion, of course, was for renewables. And hydro takes the top priority, and second is wind, and third may be solar.
Sri Lanka targets at contributing 70% from the renewable energy sector in the energy mix. and also saving about 1,500 gigawatt hours by the year 2030. How do you think that these targets could be achieved, and also what should be the strategies in achieving them?
I must say, if you only take the electricity sector, right, energy sector is vast. Even now we have what 40% contribution in the energy sector from renewables, including biomass, maybe even more than 40. And you will be surprised, until 1995, our entire electricity generation was from renewables, hydro, thanks to late and great engineer Vimla Surendra. After that, of course, our demand was growing very fast, so we had to go in for thermal energy. So now people are thinking of again going back to renewables, so it's nothing new for us. We can do it, but we must be very conscious and aware that the grid behavior has its own peculiarities. If the grid is very strong and has enough what I call the inertia in the grid, then introducing 70 or even 80% of renewables can be tolerated. And as I said before, we had 100% renewables at one time, that was hydro. But that was hydro was backed up with hydro storages. And these things can be managed. These things can be planned. So you can't do these things overnight. It has to have a gradual transition, and that is very, very good and very should be encouraged. Then things will happen, fall in place, and people will learn about the vagaries of weather. People will learn about the things that they should do and they should not do, both from the perspective of the user as well as the supplier. So it's a learning curve, because what I said before, the 100% renewables, as I said before, was backed up with hydro storages in the, let's say, reservoirs of Victoria, Brandanigala, Kotmale, and whatnot. But now that is fixed. Then the other renewables that are coming in are fluctuating, as we very well know. Solar fluctuates, wind fluctuates, right? So that's a different dimension. These are not insurmountable problems, but these are problems that need to be recognized and valued, because all the solutions are also expensive. Also has a cost. I shouldn't say expensive, has a cost. So that cost has to be sort of internalized. And just because renewable, I'm a great fan of renewables. I'm the one who introduced solar photovoltaics. So I'm a great fan of renewables. But I should also realize right now, when renewables come in a large way, there will be a cost associated with smoothing the ripples, smoothing these vagaries. Because as I said before, the renewables, like if you take only solar, it's not very fair to only take solar as renewables. There's wind, which is quite good. And we know after about 5 o'clock in the evening, the solar is nothing. So we have to have an additional backup storage, stored energy somewhere. So pump storage schemes are there. If people are talking about pump storage, is something new to Sri Lanka, but if you go to countries like Japan, about 70% of the hydropower plants are all pump storage. What does it do? When other generators are there, when there's excess generation, they store the water back in the pump storage upper reservoirs, and they use it in the evening. So these are schemes that can be very well managed. That's what I'm saying. The main point is, it's not a slogan of 70%, 80% or whatever percent. It's not a mere slogan. It should be well thought out, well managed, well implemented, executed. Then we are going to achieve that.
Right, so that's about 2030. But at the same time, the world leaders are talking about a transitioning into a net zero carbon future by 2050. So what do you think the challenges for Sri Lanka in the energy sector by the year 2050, and how should, I would emphasize the word should, how should Sri Lanka achieve that?
We should always look at the broader energy picture than the electricity sector. This is where a lot of people make a mistake. Electricity right now, if you take as a percentage in the whole energy supply pie, it's only about 10 to 12%. Still, there's a large chunk of petroleum, large chunk of biomass contributing to the energy supply. So, it has to be taken in the whole. And this it's not something that we cannot achieve. We have already achieved quite a lot of renewables, because we have completely forgotten the biomass sector. right? People are using still biomass, about 30 to 40% of people are still cooking with biomass, or maybe even 60%. And the entire contribution from biomass is about 40%. And do you know that according to the Sri Lanka Sustainability Authority statistics, about 70% of our industrial energy is coming from biomass? Why are we neglecting that? We must encourage, emphasize, and sort of enhance. And also we must think of replantation, like in Upper Kotmale. We had hardly cut any trees. It was just a 60-acre pond, 25 hectares. But we have grown but 1.2 million trees. So these carbon capture, carbon sequestration, so these can be very well achieved if you have a long-term sustainable plan and take it seriously and implement all these measures. I know this is a big challenge for Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka is used to this kind of transition this way, that way, and we have been, I was always saying, in a very dark green energy sector, not a green energy sector, a dark green energy sector. So why are we making it diluted? We can still go green, no issue whatsoever.
Shavi, you are also a member of the board of directors of the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority. How do you think that this authority should get about in contributing towards the prosperity of Sri Lanka, particularly from a sustainable energy arena?
If you take the other countries, there are very strong energy authorities. Some of them even control the utilities. Now, SLSEA had a genesis from the Energy Conservation Fund. So it has a legacy of focusing only on energy conservation initially. So I wonder whether we have lost our main focus. If you read the act, it's very clear. Policy advocacy or policy promotion or whatever it says. In this aspect, I would like to really concentrate on the policy aspects. There's no other organization that is capable or mandated in Sri Lanka to talk about energy policy. So it should fairly and squarely falls on the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority. More so because the energy should be sustainable. Not only the development, but energy supply should also be sustainable. So in that context, I would recommend, and I really have been telling the board, that we must get involved in policy analysis first. There are myriads of policies that we have to analyze thoroughly and find out what is the best policy. Then we must policy formulate. And not only that, you must do a policy advocacy. So these three things, the SLSEA cannot shirk their responsibility. It's an inalienable right and duty of the Sri Lanka Sustainability Authority to do that. They stay focused on policy. Yes, they are doing some implementation that is quite natural, and after some time, this implementation should be taken over by some other authority, or it can be even a branch of the SEA, and they should really focus on energy policy. That is where the entire country's economy will stand on.
Finally, looking back at 40 years of your professional experience in the energy sector, what is your key message to the younger generation who would take over the energy sector in Sri Lanka in the future?
Tall order, country before self. We may have our own pet ideas, pet views. We can't any longer be in our own silos. If you do that, we can forget about the energy sector in Sri Lanka. There are no lobbyists. There should not be any lobbyists. Renewable lobby, non-renewable lobby, energy conservation lobby. We should all get together. We should all work in unison, having only one objective. The best form of energy, the best strategy for energy conservation or management or demand side management, and a best mix of energy, all kinds of energy like renewables. As I said, I'm a great fan of renewables, right? And then also there should be other stabilizing energy sources like certain thermals, right? You just cannot eliminate all of those. So let's forget about our differences of opinion. We may like one or another better, but let's forget about all those personal traits, personal likes and dislikes. Let's look at the country. Let's be rational about our decisions. Rational use of energy, this is a keyword now. buzzing around, and country before self. Be determined, stay focused, as I said before, forget the noise around, do your job and stay focused and do the best for the country. Finally, Namis, if you may permit me to say, wind up, if I might to wind this up, I had a great thing that is always working in my mind whenever I do whatever. The quotation comes from late and great physicist Albert Einstein, which most of us revere and like his work. He said, "I thank everyone who said no to me. Because of them, I did it myself." So you, the younger generation, do it yourself. If everyone says no, do it yourself.
I am sure it's a very good message for the future generation. Shavi, thanks very much for being with us. On behalf of the Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority, I would like to thank you for contributing your knowledge, the tacit knowledge, and taking your time to be with us. Thank you very much, and all the very best to you.
Thank you, Namis. It was a pleasure.